Hello and welcome to another episode of the Candice and Elisa show. As usual, if you like the show, guys, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can see us. Today, we are tackling a couple of different headlines and heartbreaking headlines, actually, because although we were planning to just cover one of these, when we found out more evidence and more details about the other two, it just made sense to really talk about all three issues. So there are two things that we're really going to look at today. The one is the fact that a gentleman by the name of Jacob Blake was shot in Wisconsin and he's currently in critical condition. And 2 days ago, Trayford Pellerine, who was 31, was followed from a convenience store in Lafayette, and he was shot and killed. And both of these incidents were caught on camera. And now it brings us to our next topic, which I actually think ties together. Kellyanne Conway, who is the consultant for Donald Trump, who's been one of his most vocal supporters, actually recently resigned. And because her daughter's been coming out on social media and she was looking for emancipation, and her husband had been very vocal against the Trump administration. Now, the reason I wanted to speak about all of these is because how does one continue to support a presidency that refuses to change policing, that refuses to acknowledge that there's a problem, and who's got more issue with the fact that people are protesting than the actual killings that are taking place in his own country? And that's where I actually want to start at, Elisa. I want to know from you, what is your feelings around what's currently unfolding in the US? And I want to start with protesting, because so many people are so vocal against protests. But I'm starting to think, it seems like it might be in my head, but it seems like we are always protesting. Is this just me, or what is going on?
No, I think it's quite telling that Donald Trump Jr. has now gone and said that these protests are anarchy. It just shows you the point of view, right? I don't think that there's a level of understanding or empathy from the presidency to see what's actually going on the ground. And I think there's a massive disconnect between policy changes and protests, because yes, people keep protesting, but the policy doesn't change. And it would seem in the US, it doesn't seem, it just is an ongoing thing in the US that they have completely racist police forces that will target Black people in a very different way to white. And this ties into the almost weekly, if not monthly, mass shootings that they have in schools. So it just feels like a culture of violence in a way, and this culture is not really addressed from a policy level. It's kind of labeled, oh, this is just anarchy, these people are crazy, just don't listen to them and let's move on. The problem here that I'm seeing is that thankfully with social media is that these videos are coming to the foreground and the world is watching. Now that Kellyanne Conway has stepped down because of this difference of opinion in her family of people who are Trump supporters and people who are not Trump supporters, I think you can see that that's just another example of the way in which this country is divided at the very heart. You have Trump's most trusted advisor that's been with him, the most consistent person that's been with him throughout his presidency, and now she's stepping down. So what does this look like for the country moving forward, and what does it mean for his campaign? Hopefully it means this is just not going to work out, but what do you think?
Is Trump not like the cat with 9 lives? He seems to be someone who, no matter what happens,
125 now.
It's so frustrating to me. And the reason I wonder about protesting is I genuinely feel like protests occur all the time. It feels like it's a never-ending cycle, right? George Floyd really catapulted them within this year. And then people were protesting for Breonna Taylor, whose, killers have still not been imprisoned. And now, protests are taking place with Jacob Blake and Trayford Pellerine. And I just wonder, are people being listened to? Are these protests effective in any sort of way? Because I look at it and I think, when we heard about this a few years ago, with Trayvon Martin and, all the other victims that have come to this point, and people have, really elevated this and said, we can't keep getting killed. And then the argument then becomes, well, white people get killed by the police too. No one, firstly, should be getting killed by the police. Let's just put that out there. No human being should be unjustly killed by the people who are there to protect and serve them. However, when you look at the statistics in proportion to the fact that Black people are minorities within the US, and how many, in proportion to how many there are, how many of them are being targeted and killed by the police, then it's a completely different story, right? And for me, I look at the Kellyanne Conway situation and I think to myself, how would you be able to be like in a relationship, with someone who has such incredibly different points of view? And I hesitate to say this because I think, people will look at it and be like, oh, no, but you can coexist. However, I think of it from a point of view that says, if the example you gave earlier when we were discussing this is, if you are in a relationship with a neo-Nazi and they practice and they, racist and they, and it's like, these aren't just different points of view. These are human rights issues, right? So if you are someone who's advocating for human rights and you feel like everyone should have a fair, lived experience, and your partner is completely opposed to that, I don't know how you can keep going to bed with this person or speaking to this person or sharing dinner with this person. And to me, it just, like you said, it shows how this administration has really gone into the roots and the heart of every home. And it has divided friendships. It has divided, relationships. The fact that her daughter wants to get emancipated from her tells us a lot. And she's only 15. And so to me, it's kind of like looking at the US right now and really trying to figure out, like, when does it change? And I understand that the biggest argument is, well, the police force is already there, right? And the stupid hashtag that goes around, Blue Lives Matter. You can choose your career. You cannot choose your skin color, right? And so for me, I really want to know from you, how do you think this needs to be addressed moving forward, especially with policing, which seems to be the biggest issue at the moment that America's facing?
I think you asked a telling question at the beginning is, does protesting actually work? And I think the thing for me is that no single thing, whether it be protesters versus media versus lawmakers versus politicians, no single thing operates on its own. It's all kind of like, I can take this so far, but now you got to come in and take it that far. And then we can, and it's a collective thing. What I think is happening at the moment is that there's such fracture between all of these different parts that somebody goes, okay, I'm protesting about this. And then the lawmakers are having so much opposition, and there's so many, different views and different, things happening. And especially when you have the head of the country that is just divisive by nature, by his very existence, he's just a divisive personality. You speak about, could you be with someone in a relationship that had completely opposing points of view? That can also be extended to, how is this country operating at the moment when, at least 50% of the population, as we did see from the previous election, is viscerally against these points of view that now your head of state has. It's just, I think that it's just caused this fracture, as you mentioned, that's not allowing change to take place in a way that flows, because there's just too much that's going against itself. It's almost imploding internally. And also, again, with the police, you cannot have a police system that works if you do not have clear direction from a head of state that actually says, this is wrong. We cannot continue doing this. And as long as you have somebody that keeps endorsing tweets and comments that are always about, oh, look at how they're vandalizing these stores and look at the protesters, it's completely the wrong messaging. So it's causing this division. As a police officer, do you support your president? Do you support the people? Do you even know what you believe? I think it's getting very murky because of the conflicting direction. And in terms of, being with someone, Kellyanne Conway clearly discovered, if this is the sole reason for her decision, we still, I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is, but she seems to have decided that actually it was fragmenting her family to such degree that now she has to step away from perhaps her belief system and prioritize what matters, which I think in the end, family and your children should matter to that level, but I don't know. I mean, what would you do? Could you?
I don't know if you can tell, but I probably couldn't. No, but for me, it comes down not so much to differing opinions. I think it goes so much more than just we have a difference of opinion, right? The difference of opinion is I like Mexican food, you like, Italian food.
Chinese,
Like
or-
that's a difference of opinion, right? I could even go as far as saying like I wouldn't mind marrying interfaith. I wouldn't mind marrying someone who, is Muslim and I'm Christian and whatever the case is. Because those things innately aren't damaging and those things innately aren't infringing on anyone else's human rights. So for me, that is where the issue lies, that whenever you infringe your belief system over someone else's human right, that is a huge issue for me, whether it's pro-lifers, or whatever the case is. You have no right, to look at another human being and say, your choice to exist, your choice to keep your baby or not keep your baby is up to me or is up to legislation. I just think that's incredibly cruel. And so for me, this is where that, it comes to, the table all the time, that when people speak about Trump, it's always like, do not disrespect the president of the United States, right? However, what we need to really look at is why is the president so comfortable disrespecting everyone else? He's comfortable disrespecting the Chinese. He's comfortable disrespecting, Black Lives Matter. He's comfortable disrespecting anyone with a differing opinion. He's very comfortable disrespecting women, may we not forget. And so to me, as you said, it is very important that people start coming to the party, especially people who are setting legislation, people who are hiring police, people who are working with the police force, to say, if someone, there's so many tests, right? There's so many, psychological things that one can go through to test if someone is biased, to test if someone is racist, to test if someone is homophobic. Because if you have that innate belief system, I don't care how many police will come out and say, well, what I believe doesn't, it actually does. If you are neo-Nazi on the weekend and you put on a uniform on Monday, that conditioning you don't leave behind. You're not like, oh, I'm taking off my racist costume today and I'm gonna put on my, inclusive uniform, because it's how you view these people. If you view someone as, subhuman or someone who doesn't deserve to live, of course, that's how you're going to operate. And so for me, it comes down to people who are already in the police force need to be vetted and their biases need to be brought to the surface. And people who are entering the police force need to be vetted, right?
Yeah.
And so what's your opinion on that?
Well, because I think we've seen in the US that to be an officer, all you need is like you can get out of high school and train for like a year or something. I need to actually look at the exact, but I was appalled to see how short the training period is. It's something like a year and you can be given a gun. Like it's very fast. So I think certainly the process to bear a weapon needs to be so much more intense and certainly there has to be a vetting process to why does someone want to carry a weapon? Like, do you really want to peacekeep, or are you upset with the world because of some other things? Or do you have a chip on your shoulder that you need to go to therapy for first or process first before you're actually bearing a weapon, right? And yeah, I completely understand what you're saying about, could you be with someone that's that polar opposite? I think it would be very hard. I certainly couldn't be with someone that, as you said, were actually hurting others actively while I'm with them. Equally though, I remember a friend on social media, somebody saying, anyone who's a Trump supporter, please feel free to delete yourselves from my account now, right? Which I thought was interesting. And then I had another friend comment and say, don't you think it's your responsibility to engage? Because this is your circle, right? This is your inner circle, if you will, or extended circle, whatever. And I do think there's a part of that. Like, I do feel there's a responsibility to engage with opposing points of view, because how is this change going to happen, right? We're saying, oh, policy is not going to change or whatever, but it has to be much more grassroots as well. It has to be that in our day-to-day, like you mentioned in the Black Lives Matter episode, that we actively go, okay, you are a neo-Nazi, okay, you are a Trump supporter, why? Like, let's communicate and let's try and understand and let's give each other points of view. And I'm not saying we're going to change it. All I'm saying is you might plant a seed for them to understand, actually, the other side might not be as evil or as crazy as we might have thought. I remember reading a fascinating story of a guy in the South, in the US, who had actually managed to change the minds of 200 KKK supporters today, to drop their, support or whatever. And he was a jazz player, a musician, a black piano player. And how did he do it? By sitting down one-to-one with them, for these people to understand that this guy was actually a really awesome guy, a really awesome musician, and a human being. Oftentimes we forget there's a human being on the other side. There's just this otherness label, and it's everyone's job to deconstruct that and remove this idea of otherness. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think what you've actually brought up is so crucial. It is the willingness to come to the table. And it is that, understanding that each and every one of us come from a certain situation, background, conditioning that has brought us to this point, right? And sometimes our conditioning is not necessarily the most productive for society, or it's not exactly inclusive of all people who live within the same environment or community, or the same world, really. And so for me, it is very important to sit down with these people and engage. And for me, it's never about casting out. It's never about saying, oh, you're a leper, swim to your island. And because I don't believe people are innately good and bad. I think all of us are really in the middle, right? We on a spectrum, and decisions make us either lean towards one side, and another decision makes us lean towards the other. And I think it is important to allow yourself that space to say, I'm willing to engage. However, if this is something that is so rooted in your core that you're not willing to engage, that's where the issue comes in, right? Because engagement is exactly that. It's a two-way street. It's not a one way. And there's only so much you can do pushing against the wall, and if that wall is not going to break, it's not going to break. And so to me, if someone has a personality profile like a Trump, I struggle to see how many people can sit down with him and try and convince him about, hey, I'm a woman, I deserve equal rights, I mean, he loves his daughter to death. And I feel like Trump is someone who can separate those he loves from the rest, so he can be like, yeah, no, she deserves it, but the rest don't. She deserves it because she's special, but everyone else may not. And so I completely agree with you. I never believe in people saying, you know what, if you are an All Lives Matter person, or you're a Black Lives Matter person, or you're a Trump supporter, or you are this, separate yourself from that situation. I think it is much, better to engage and to connect, and also understand, where is this person speaking from? Because I know in the beginning of the Trump election, right, it was like Trump promised all these things of job security, and people were feeling disenfranchised, and people were feeling like their jobs weren't protected, and that they were marginalized in whatever arena of their life. And therefore Trump became someone who spoke to this, their core pain point. And so it's what is this person's pain point, and why they're opting from that pain point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of learned experience. I often ask myself, had I been born in Trump shoes, right? Had I been born in a neo-Nazi's, life, can I be as pretentious as to say that I would still be myself, and I would still be incredibly open-minded and respect? I mean, it's all learned, right? A baby is not born and goes, Black lives don't matter, or, women are all, a baby doesn't have that. It's all learned. Everything is taught. It's shared experience. And I think it's understanding that people are coming from somewhere. It's too easy to just blanket statement say, all of these people are crazy, or all of these people are evil, or it's too easy. And it has to be broken down to understanding we're all just people, and quite possibly if we switch sides, if we switch places, we might have turned out exactly the same. And that's scary, right? So I just think, I mean, this, again, once more, a conversation that could go on for ages, which we are going to have to wrap up soon. But certainly, I mean, guys, what do you think? I mean, could you be with someone that was completely opposite in terms of belief systems to you? Let us know below. And Candice, I think it's something we're going to have to keep on revisiting as we go along.
I think it will always be something we continue revisiting. And I think, it's okay I think it's very important to just, close on a statement that says, it's okay to feel outrage. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel marginalized. It's okay to feel like, you're not being heard, seen, or accounted for, really, as in the case of the United States. And it's also okay to say, you know what, I want to step back from this for a minute, take a breather before I engage with anyone else, because
Absolutely.
I think sometimes we come from that place of pain and that place of being marginalized or feeling like you're pushed into a corner. Even when you do try to engage in the best way, it will rub you up the wrong way, right? Depending on how you slept, depending on whatever happened that day. And so it's okay to give yourself that break, to step back before engaging. And yeah, I think that's where we'll leave it for this week, because
thank you so much, guys, for watching. We look forward to engaging again next week. And in the meantime, just keep your eyes on the news and just self-care as best you can, because we're in for the ride.
Bye, guys.
Bye.